Boom and boom. Happy Wednesday. Welcome back. We are continuing our Wednesday evening series on Bible patterns since Bible times. We are segueing and transitioning out of the 60s into the 70s. Before we do that, though, I do want to call our attention. This is a bonus from Eric here. Genesis chapter 12. Please join me there right quick.
Like bonus French fries when you plant fries in the bottom of your head.
Especially when you ordered onion rings.
I was just going to say in the bottom of your head.
Or vice versa.
Yeah.
Genesis 12. So last week, towards the end of our discussion, which I thoroughly enjoyed, Hitler came up. And as far as World War II and the interaction, of course, with the Lord and his people, the Jews, and all that was gone through there. And it made me think of something that I'd like to call to mind here in relation to both Hitler and the 6-Day War that we just finished going through. What does this have to do with Genesis 12? Well, here we have God making a promise to Abraham and a prophecy. Genesis 12, first 3 verses. Now the Lord said to Abram, go forth from your country and from your relatives and from your father's house to the land which I will show you. And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, and so you shall be a blessing. And verse 3 is key to our discussion. Lord tells Abraham, and I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth will be blessed. Again, Genesis, written by Moses, is not law of Moses. These are events that take place before Moses is born. The law of Moses is no longer in effect. Genesis absolutely still is. These promises absolutely still hold. What God said in Genesis 12 back in 1892 BC is still alive and well in 2022 AD. So what's this have to do with 6-Day War, Hitler, and all that stuff? Well, remember, I know we've slept since then, Shemitah, Sabbath year, around September to September, roughly speaking. The Shemitah, the Sabbath year, began September of 1944 and ended September of 1945. It was in that Sabbath year that while the whole world was in the midst of World War II, it was in that Sabbath year that first the war in Europe came to an end in the spring with Hitler's suicide, and then later on with the Japan surrender. So, but remember, all of Europe was threatened big time by the reality of Hitler and the Third Reich and what they were doing. England came out and France, technically victors of the war, but they were in very bad shape afterwards. It was bad news what was done. And so why am I saying all this? I'm trying to emphasize that Hitler's Third Reich was a very powerful, effective threat to world society. Yet, the Third Reich that sought, and I love the statement that Jonathan Cahn makes here, the Third Reich that sought to destroy the children of Israel. We're in a Shemitah year. What does Shemitah mean? It means a few different things. It means release. It means a letting fall. It also means a casting down. So the Third Reich of Hitler that set its sights targeting the Jewish people, this big bad totalitarian regime collapsed and fell in the year of the Shemitah. This big threat to the Jewish nation, the Holocaust killing 6 million Jews, that power was destroyed in the very year of the Hebrew casting down. So no matter how big and bad a threat they were, God said, I will curse those who curse you. 6-Day War. Fast forwarding a bit, again, Bible is our key source here. I'm looking to, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, but you just said it, 6 million Jews dead.
Yeah.
I mean, couldn't it have happened before it got to that point? You know, I mean, when you see the pictures of the Holocaust and even the videos.
Oh, yeah.
It's horrible.
Absolutely.
It's beyond horrible. So why did all that have to happen?
Why did that have to happen? Along the lines of very important question. Why didn't God intervene before it started? Along the lines of, and it's a very legitimate, serious question. Why do bad things happen to good people? We are in a sin-infected world, clearly, where God has allowed free will. Now, we have to remember everything of this world, including our precious physical health and even our physical life, is temporary. Our focus is eternal and needs to be. This world has an expiration date. This is all temporary. Everything physical is temporary, including our lives. And I'm saying this to say, God always is trying to get our attention on the eternal things. Sometimes the physical things, I mean, 6 million physical lives lost. I mean, how can you even fathom that? You know, how can you even, so it's hard to comprehend such a tragic loss, and every life is sacred and precious. But remember, every one of those 6 million lives is eternity and is spending eternity somewhere. And so God's focus is to use the physical to bring about a spiritual direction. And so it would be very easy for me to say, like my wife just said, it would have been so much better in my human limited understanding for those 6 million lives to have been spared physically, all that, for God to have prevented this from happening or stopped them when they first tried. And the reality is, I'm not God, and he knows what he's doing, which sounds like an easy, almost a cop-out or a write-off, but it's true. There's a bigger picture than what we see in front of us. I rightly would like to see for those who've seen the movie Schindler's List, after all the lives he saved, he's still looking at each little thing. Oh my gosh, I could have used this to save just one more. I mean, it's just, it's a heartbreak. That'd be a very powerful film. And the point to all this is that even though God allows some things to happen that are just horrific in the sin-infected world, where evil abounds, he always has the final say. Nothing gets past the Lord. And sometimes the way he does things, we don't always understand the whys for the timing and what's allowed versus not allowed, but he is always, always righteous and fair and just. Sister Minnie.
I think that sometimes it takes horrific things to wake people up.
Yes.
God always seems like he wants to waken people up when they stray away from him. And I'm not saying this is punishment to them.
Right.
I'm saying it's a way to get those who didn't perish to really pay attention and turn to God if they haven't, and really depend on him, because they had nowhere else to go.
And with that, I'll piggyback on what Sister Minnie said about the Lord using our free will and the evil of this world to be a wake-up call for us. For those who were supporters, like there were plenty in America who were supporters of true fascism, which has nothing to do with right wing. Fascism is, remember, Nazi stood for a National Socialist Workers' Party. There's nothing right wing about socialist. There's nothing right wing about big government. But what the problem is, this whole leftist big government thing, bigger than personal politics, this is a godless ideology. It is anti-God. Hitler was anti-God. There's nothing Christian about him. Stalin, anti-God, communism, all these, that's something they all have in common. Elevating the state of man and man in the statehood with no God above. Please. Yes, Mao. Oh, I think Mao has the most murders under far more than the 6 million Jews.
And it was the point to stamp out, not totally, but almost stamp out Buddhism.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And absolutely, nothing is higher than the state. And so one of the problems we had as far as the wake-up call was we had people in America, New York Times and others, who were squashing the truth of the Holocaust because it showed there were problems with their ideology. And just like, and the Holocaust is rightly compared, obvious differences, but rightly compared with abortion. Because how do you succeed? Hitler's one man. How did he get so many people on board? You dehumanize your enemy. How is abortion so widely accepted? You dehumanize the one you're targeting. Those babies are dehumanized. They're considered, they're talked out of their human condition. And so those are the kind of things that happen, very godless. And so with that, while all these things happened, God had his final say. The great Hitler ended up, having a very humbling suicide as things were falling apart. And that happened, no coincidence, in the Jewish year. Here is trying to wipe out Israel, wipe out the Jews, and he gets cast down in the Jewish year of casting down. So some doubts are worth connecting. Please.
Venture to say actually that without the Holocaust, really, I don't think that I think the cataclysm was needed to bring about the push for Israel to become Israel, for the Jews to take back their land. And
Absolutely.
Israel again.
I mean, you're right. What a terrible thing that's what it took for the world's guilt and recognition. These people need their own home after what they just went through. Remember, of all people, I mean, we see how the United Nations treats Israel today. It was the United Nations that voted Israel in as a state.
Was there any other time that they could do that?
No, exactly. And they seem to soon regret it. Which brings us to the 6-Day War. Remember, as the Soviet Union, again, godless, was telling Egypt the lies about Israel getting ready to invade, which they weren't. Egypt got the United Nations out the way and surrounded, along with the other Arab nations, Syria and them, surrounded Israel. Remember, the government of Israel in June of 1967, when they were surrounded by 200,000 enemies, armed by the Soviets with twice as many tanks and planes, all that stuff, they were stockpiling coffins. They were having the priests go out and consecrate public parks as cemeteries. They feared this would be the second Holocaust and they would be wiped out. Nasser of Egypt said, my whole plan is to wipe out the Jewish nation. That's what we're here to do. And so little Israel, big bad Arab world, God had other plans. In this year of Jubilee, what happens? This brings us to, and I didn't talk a lot about this at the time, as my computer here wakes up. Let's go to here. Operation Focus. June 5th of 1967, Monday. Just real quick here. When Israel decided we're not going to sit and wait to be attacked and wiped out, we're going to launch a strike. So they launched an airstrike, wiped out the air force of the Arabs in Egypt and Syria, just boom. So
The whole day?
check this out. Let's see. During the Israeli Air Force, 250 combat aircraft at its disposal, employing 352 sorties, that's how many times they went out, prevailed over a coalition of approximately 600 combat aircraft. The Israeli Air Force destroyed 452 enemy aircraft out of a total 600. 452 out of 600 gone, including 79 in air combat, and they lost 46 of their own. 24 Israeli pilots and hundreds of Arab pilots were killed. So to give you an idea of, they destroyed, well, this is in Egypt, 338 aircraft, in Syria, 61, Jordan, 29, Iraq, 23, Lebanon, 1, and Israel lost 19. Yeah. So in the face of doom, God is God, and he moves, and he protects, and he covers his own. And in a Sabbath year, in a Jubilee year, I will bless those who bless you, and when it curses you, I will curse. England supported Israel, then turned on Israel. England was at the height of world power, and they were supplanted by America under Truman, who supported Israel. I will bless who blesses you. I will curse who curses you. That promise to Abraham in effect today.
You knew these other countries would learn this by now.
It's called willful denial. Yeah, I choose to be ignorant of these things because it doesn't fit my goals. So let's go to Jeremiah 19. As we get ready, get into the 70s here. Jeremiah 19, some significant stuff we're going to be talking about. Some heavy stuff, but then some light at the end of the tunnel as well. Jeremiah 19. And we are going to go here. All right, what's up? So in Jeremiah 19, let's read the first 11 verses. Thus says the Lord, Jeremiah 19:1, go and buy a potter's earthenware jar, take some of the elders of the people and some of the senior priests, then go out to the valley of Ben Hinnom, which is by the entrance of the potsherd gate, and proclaim there the words that I tell you, and say, hear the word of the Lord, O kings of Judah and inhabitants of Jerusalem. Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, behold, I am about to bring a calamity upon this place, at which the ears of everyone that hears it will tingle, because they have forsaken me and have made this an alien place, and have burned sacrifices in it to other gods, that neither they nor their forefathers nor the kings of Judah had ever known, and because they have filled this place with the blood of the innocent, and have built the high places of Baal to burn their sons in the fire as burnt offerings to Baal, a thing which I never commanded or spoke of, nor did it ever enter my mind. Therefore, behold, days are coming, declares the Lord, when this place will no longer be called Topeth, or the valley of Ben Hinnom, but rather the valley of slaughter. I will make void the counsel of Judah and Jerusalem in this place, and I will cause them to fall by the sword before their enemies, and by the hand of those who seek their life. And I will give over their carcasses as food for the birds of the sky and the beasts of the earth. I will also make this city a desolation and an object of hissing. Everyone who passes by it will be astonished and hiss because of all its disasters. I will make them eat the flesh of their sons and the flesh of their daughters, and they will eat one another's flesh in the siege and in the distress with which their enemies and those who seek their life will distress them. Then you are to break the jar in the sight of the men who accompany you and say to them, thus says the Lord of hosts, just so I will break this people and this city, even as one breaks a potter's vessel, which cannot again be repaired. And they will bury in Topeth because there's no other place for burial. Wow, like I said, kind of heavy. They were sacrificing children to other gods. And this is where? The valley of Ben Hinnom, Topeth. You kind of see here, it's a little slow reacting on the computer, but this is a valley right here. There's hill here. Jerusalem's off to the side here. It was in this valley that they were sacrificing their children to the other gods. So God says, this is a place your bodies are going to be buried. In fact, you're going to run out of room to bury, because in the place you sacrifice the blood of the innocents, that's where your blood's going to be shed.
And who was sacrificed?
God's people. Judah. This is the nation of Judah. This is after the 10 tribes of the north have been conquered by Assyria. Oh yeah. God's own people turned away from God. Oh yeah, God's people did that. Yeah. And so you'd be amazed how many quote unquote Christians are pro-abortion. Yeah. So the gate overlooking Tophet and the valley of Hinnom is the ground on which the nation's children have been sacrificed. Now, this is a prophetic pronouncement and a prophetic act, what he does with the jar there. This is the foreshadowing of judgment. So Jeremiah is prophesying judgment will come for what they've done in that valley. Because they shed the blood of their children in that valley, so in that valley their own blood will be shed. The word there to speak of that coming judgment is makkah, which comes up in a few different places. As with other words for disease, it can refer to a stroke, a wound, an epidemic, or a plague. So those different definitions of the judgment will come back into play later on as we go. So this brings us to the 1970s. How does Jeremiah and the Valley of Ben Hinnom and Topeth bring us to the 1970s? Let's take a field trip to the New York State Capitol in the city of Albany. We are flashing back in time to Thursday, April 9th of 1970. Here in the center here is the New York State Capitol building. And while that's loading, I'll pull up the pictures here. There it is. Oh, we're going to become very familiar with it. Uh-huh. We're going to talk about that. Or have a little something on that.
Albany's pretty far from the city of New York.
Yes, but there's a connection. What is done in one and what is done in the other. So in this ornate building, yeah, on Thursday, April 9th of 1970, the New York Assembly, which is their version of the House of Representatives, just like the federal government has House of Representatives and Senate, so too most states have a similar setup. The New York Assembly on Thursday, April 9th of 1970, passes a law initiating abortion on demand with no geographic limitations. The state of New York. Come one, come all. Here in New York, yeah. Yep,
In 1970?
1970.
Before Roe versus Wade.
Exactly where we're going. The next day, Friday, April 10th, the New York Senate passes the law. This act establishes the state of New York as the nation's abortion capital. Soon after, New York legalizes the killing of unborn children, begins drawing women from across the country into its borders to take part in the act. Thus, it rapidly emerges as the nation's undisputed epicenter of abortion. So years before it's legalized throughout the land, to Sister Ashley's point, New York serves as the dark wellspring through which abortion spreads to the rest of the nation, because it's drawn people into it. More abortions are performed in New York than in any other place in America. And of all the abortions that take place in New York, the overwhelming majority are performed in New York City. So what was authorized in Albany, New York City becomes the center. So when it comes to the killing of children, New York is America's capital city. New York is America's Tophet, our Valley of Ben Hinnom, New York City. Remember that. There are different descriptions for that. Yeah, with the burning and the fire. Yeah. So also in 1970, slide that back over a little bit. Thank you. We have, refresh, there we go. We have the rising of the first tower of the World Trade Center, completed in 1970, in fact. Here's a picture of the construction in 1970. The same year that abortion on demand as a universal right is voted into law. In the same state of New York. In the same city, New York City, abortion capital. The towers crown the capital. The same hand that signed the paper to begin the rise of those towers is the same hand that signs the paper that begins the killing of children on demand. Republican governor of New York, Nelson Rockefeller. descendant of John D. Rockefeller.
I was talking about watching, think about the same with him.
Yeah. See, there it is in 1970 being constructed. The first tower, it was then the other one right there. But notice there's something in front of it. Any idea what that might be? It's a church, a specific church. That is a little church known as St. Paul's Chapel. That is the church where George Washington, after his inauguration on April 30th of 1789, where he and Congress, the federal Congress, marched in procession to this place, and the first act of a united government of America was to pray for God's blessing and invoke his protection and vow our allegiance to him and any curses that come with falling away from that.
Why Catholic?
What's that?
Why was it always Catholic?
It wasn't Catholic. No, I know we think when we hear saint, we think Catholic, but they don't have a corner on the market. It's, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think
Yeah.
What's the one that's close to the Capitol now?
That I'm not sure offhand.
The one that, you know, when Trump was, when they had that.
Yeah, I'm not sure what denomination that was off the top of my head.
Thought that was the one where all the politicians, you know, went to show off.
Yeah, I remember the event. I don't know the denomination of the place offhand.
Does denomination matter?
Not particularly.
I mean,
But it's interesting, but yeah,
well,
Is Catholic Church church?
well, that's.
not according to scripture,
Yeah, but that's what I was thinking.
but it's
So-
not about the building. It's about what was done there.
Because I'm thinking, well, you know.
It was about our dedication as a nation. First day we are in business with a functioning government, we dedicated ourselves to God in that place. Number 30. St. Paul's Chapel. I have a bad habit of saying cathedral instead of chapel because they're both C words, but it's a chapel. So just to give you a for instance here. And it's a bit slow tonight. There we go, it's loading up. So here is St. Paul's Chapel filling in here. Something I want to show you here. As we zoom out. Yeah, it's going a little slow. There we are. That's what I wanted to do. So there's an overhead shot, St. Paul's Chapel. Notice what we have right here. Here we have St. Paul's Chapel. Right over here, we have Federal Hall where Washington had his inauguration. Right next to it, the New York Stock Exchange. St. Paul's Chapel, what do we have right in front of it? Ground zero, this is where the Twin Towers were. Twin Towers were built a quarter mile from St. Paul's Chapel, where our nation was dedicated to God. So the same year in 1970, this will come up. This will have a connection with something that happened in the last 2 years. In 1970, the state of Washington is one of 2 states in America that follow New York in sanctioning the act of abortion and bringing it to America. The other one happened to be Alaska. So those are the highlights from 1970, other than the death of the Beatles and the birth of me.
Well, I got my car.
Okay, another important events like Brother Clay's car, yes. Let's go to talking about the state of affairs. Mention this guy in the 40s, community organizer Saul Alinsky. Yeah, I know. Shakedown artist, yeah, kind of things like that. Yeah, well, in 1971, he had a book come out. The book was called Rules for Radicals, follow up to an earlier book of his. In this book, he has a dedication page. Lest we forget at least an over-the-shoulder acknowledgement to the very first radical. From all our legends, mythology, and history, and who is to know where mythology leaves off and history begins, or which is which? The first radical known to man who rebelled against the establishment and did it so effectively that he at least won his own kingdom, Lucifer. Yeah.
Lucifer and Hillary Clinton.
Well, Hillary Clinton did her college thesis at Wesleyan on Saul Alinsky, saying he didn't go far enough. He wanted to be a shakedown artist from the outside. She said, no, shake it up from the inside. 2 months before he died, Alinsky told a reporter, if there's an afterlife and I have anything to say about it, I will unreservedly choose to go to hell.
He wasn't being
Mm-mm.
sarcastic or, you know,
His mindset was, I'd rather rule in hell than serve in heaven. No one's ruling in hell. Yeah. President Obama is from Hawaii. The only reason he has an association with Chicago is that's where he chose to go to follow those who followed Alinsky. Yeah. So that's that. Yeah. 1972. The American, okay, 1971, one more thing I forgot. In August, President Nixon removes the US dollar from the gold standard. Bad move. Yeah. So the whole Bretton Woods one world economy thing based on the US dollar, well, that just, yeah, it's, yeah. So in 1971, the American Bar Association, you've heard of that organization that says, hey, this is a good lawyer, we back him, we support it, you know, things like that. The American Bar Association in 1971 drafts the Uniform Abortion Act for the purpose of legalizing abortion throughout the nation. It is based on what was sanctioned in the New York State Capitol building back in Albany. 1972, the following year, the American Bar Association votes to approve the Uniform Abortion Act. So while this is going on in 1972, the upper stories of the North Tower are now complete. So the Empire State Building's 40-year reign as the world's tallest building now comes to an end. The World Trade Center becomes the tallest building on Earth, 1,368 feet. And this picture was taken in 1972 as it reached that point. Yeah. September 9th of 1972 starts a Sabbath year. How do we think this one's going to go? Yeah. On Thursday, January 11th of 1973, the S&P 500 reaches its peak at 120 and begins a long descent. 4 months after the Sabbath year begins, the stock market collapses. So the peak and the crash take place entirely within the Sabbath year. Yeah. 1970, go to 2 Kings. Let's take a look at something there. 2 Kings chapter 17, to be specific. Second Kings, I'm in 1 Kings, so that's bad why I wasn't finding it. Go to 2 Kings chapter 17. 2 Kings 17, verses 15 through 17. So this is a reminder of the state of affairs in Judah amongst the Lord's people. 2 Kings 17, 15. They rejected his statutes and his covenant, which he made with their fathers, and his warnings, with which he warned them. And they followed vanity and became vain, went after the nations which surrounded them, concerning which the Lord had commanded them not to do like them. They forsook all the commandments of the Lord their God, made for themselves molten images, even 2 calves, made an Asherah, and worshipped all the host of heaven, and served Baal. Verse 17. Then they made their sons and their daughters pass through the fire, and practiced divination and enchantments, and sold themselves to do evil in the sight of the Lord, provoking him. So they sacrificed their children through fire, sons and daughters alike. 1973, watershed year for America's spiritual and moral descent. The year following, the American Bar Association approving the Uniform Abortion Act, the Supreme Court, the nation's highest court, legalizes the killing of unborn children. In the case of ancient Israel, it was the killing of the nation's most innocent, the little children, that ultimately led to national judgment and destruction. Israel killed thousands of its children. America has killed millions. The Supreme Court decision is issued in the midst of the Shemitah, the Sabbath year. The Shemitahs of 1917 and 1945 were turning points concerning America's rising, getting into World War I, winning World War II. But the Shemitah of 1973 is a turning point concerning America's fall. It is the year America rules it legal to kill its unborn children. And it was only 11 days prior, before that decision, that the stock market had reached its peak on January 11th. It's on January 22nd, Roe v. Wade is announced. The same month, the stock market changes its momentum and begins that decline. Writing on behalf of the ruling, Justice Blackmun cites the Uniform Abortion Act from the ABA, American Bar Association, which is seen as a precursor to the Supreme Court decision. And regarding the American Bar Association Act, Harry Blackmun said, this act is based largely upon the New York Abortion Act. So there's a recognition there. So, quick question here. I mentioned there's light at the end of the tunnel. Since a jubilee is a reversal after the 49th year, if Roe v. Wade was in the Sabbath year of 1973, someone break out a calculator. What's 49 years after 1973 for a reversal and return? 1973 plus 49.
Yeah.
2022.
2022. So in the 49th year, we might expect Roe v. Wade to be overturned. Oh, wait, that already happened. Yeah. The Jubilee is a reversal and a returning, restoring. Yeah. So it's good news. It's good news. Yeah. Again, how many quinces does it take?
Okay, but, so then help me here with that amazing thing, and then the fact that all these babies were murdered in the 50 years that, you know, preceded this. And they're still being murdered today, because there are other states who are bucking this, you know?
I'll give you an example. Holocaust, Jewish nation, while there's still anti-Semitism. The Holocaust of babies. While the ruling that had been allowing it has now been removed. Federal ruling, yes. Yes. So states can ban abortion. States can say all good, including infanticide. And we'll get to that.
Yeah, so the recent Supreme Court decision overruling Roe versus Wade.
On a federal.
Throws the decision of abortion back to the states, where it should be anyway.
Yes.
So it doesn't end abortion, but it ends the federal.
The ban on banning abortion.
Which initially was, it was a a federal case.
Mhm.
So you have kind of this complete circle.
Yeah.
50 years. Okay.
Well, 7 Sabbaths, 49.
Oh, okay, sorry, 7 Sabbaths.
Yep. So also, spring of 1973, the bonds that are tying the world's currencies to the dollar are severed irrevocably with all that's going on here. Bretton Woods, which at the end of the Second World War was all about America's rise over the world's financial and economic order, that whole system collapsed. Bretton Woods was conceived and was voted on in the Sabbath year 45, and it ends in the Sabbath year of 1973. So the Shemitah has again brought about a collapse, this time of that whole financial setup. And in effect, the Shemitah affects economic and financial realms once again. So there's an important tie-in here. Both Twin Towers are completed in 1973. Go to Jeremiah 7. We finished it.
Yeah, we read it 2 Kings last.
Yeah, 17, 15 to 17. Now we're going back to Jeremiah, this time in chapter 7. Jeremiah chapter 7. Jeremiah chapter 7, verses 30 and 31. Jeremiah 7:30. For the sons of Judah have done that which is evil in my sight, declares the Lord. They have set their detestable things in the house which is called by my name to defile it. Remember, it was in this house, St. Paul's Chapel, that the nation was dedicated to God. Therefore, behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when it will no longer be called Topeth, or the valley of the son of Hinnom, but the valley of slaughter, for they will bury in Topeth because there's no other place. Both the Twin Towers are completed in 1973, the same year that the darkness reaches its completion, when the killing of the unborn children becomes the law of the land. So it all comes together, towers and the darkness. The two are joined together from the beginning, the World Trade Center towers and abortion. The prophet Jeremiah spoke of the high places of Tophet. So it wasn't Tophet, they built the high places. If New York City is the Tophet of America, then that's where our high places were built. The Twin Towers of the World Trade Center. The high places of America, those are our high places of Tophet. And as the high places of Tophet mark the place where the nation killed its children, so the Twin Towers mark the place where America kills its children. And the time when the killing begins, both 1973, both New York City. The place where the Twin Towers began was in the New York State Capitol building in Albany. That's where it was voted on for the New York abortion law. That's where the idea for the Twin Towers was also voted in. But now let's do this. Back to that assembly building in the New York. You mentioned something about the architecture, looking Middle Eastern and stuff. We are actually going to show a video. We are going to go on a little tour of the New York State Capitol building for reasons. 4 reasons. Yes. I should have had this loading up already. And we are going to see something about this particular building that was so key in these events. And this will be a good wind down place here. Oh, while that's loading, I can grab the mic. My apologies for the delay here.
Yeah, the internet's slow.
Yeah. Must be our neighbor with all his online gaming. I'm kidding.
That too.
Here we go. So we are going to take a quick couple-minute tour inside the New York State Assembly building. See what you think of this. Got your nose. It's thinking. There we are.
Stop clicking it.
Now it's going to open in 40 different windows.
Yeah, right? Stop clicking it. I think, oh,
Brent, stop, cancel. Remember, that is in this building in Albany that all of this was originated. All of this came from this building. It will be worth it. It really will. I know. And the spinning thing is wanting to, like I said, hypnotize, put me to sleep. But no, I haven't had my ice cream yet. Your eyelids are getting heavier. Will it be worse if I hit the refresh button? I'm going to try it. So while we're waiting, some fast facts down there. Gargoyle is derived from the French word gargoule, which means throat. Oh, I never thought about that before. We gargle. Gargoyle. I never thought about those two being related. See, I learned something. Gargoyles have existed for over 4,000 years. Wow. Yeah, not the real life creatures, but the use of. Yeah. Medieval gargoyles are placed on the edges of roofs to drain rainwater and prevent damage. Many gargoyle carvings on churches and other buildings appeared during the Gothic period in medieval Europe. There we go. Hooray!
Welcome back. I hope you are ready for part 2 of our Haunted Tour virtual visit, Creepy Capitol Carvings. New York dared to be different when choosing the design for the Capitol building. Instead of using classical architecture like most state capitals, they used medieval and Renaissance themes, including elements of Gothic, Romanesque, Islamic, and Renaissance architecture. The building can be said to resemble a castle or cathedral from the Middle Ages. That may be one reason why it is reputed to be haunted. Throughout the New York State Capitol and its staircases are carvings that would look quite at home in any haunted castle. Throughout the Capitol, there are carvings of animals, faces, and mythic creatures. These resemble the gargoyles famously found on cathedrals around the globe and popularized in cinema. However, technically speaking, these are not gargoyles. Gargoyles are architecturally functional, acting as decorative waterspouts to preserve the building's stonework by diverting rainwater away from the stone. A grotesque, on the other hand, doesn't serve the same practical function. Often carved into human or animal form, it is believed that the grotesque purpose was to scare away evil spirits. Are grotesques protecting the halls and stairs of our capital? Among the grotesques, you may find a menacing face made out of leaves staring back at you. It is very likely the Green Man, a pagan nature spirit who once roamed the forests of medieval Europe. The design was brought to the US by the capital's European stone carvers. Many capital stone carvers came from the British Isles and Ireland, and brought with them their own mythology, which they expressed through their carvings throughout the building, such as the lifelike details of each rigid tooth of the dragons carved on the Senate staircase, the large and dominating presence of the griffin carved outside the Hall of Government, protecting its walls. The theme of griffin carvings is a constant throughout the Capitol, both on the interior and exterior of the building, as seen in both the Senate staircase and in the Assembly Chamber. When architect Isaac Perry took over the final years of construction of the Capitol, he hired Englishman Louis J. Hinton to be the foreman for the carvers of the Great Western Staircase. Hinton and his team were instructed to create a variety of carvings and designs for the Great Western Staircase. No single carving could be repeated or replicated. Found throughout the Great Western Staircase are mysterious and unidentifiable carvings of people and animals. Some of the carvings of people throughout the staircase are believed to be relatives of the carvers, while the carvings resembling goblins or gnomes demonstrate the carver's imaginative talent of drawing inspiration from mythic creatures of legend and fairy tales. The most renowned carving of all in the New York State Capitol, one that brings thousands of people to the building in search of it, is the Capitol Demon. Although small in size, the demon tells a story that has been told throughout generations. The story often told is that a stone carver was angry with his boss and decided to put a curse on the Capitol by carving a secret devil or demon face into the stonework. The curse has been blamed for anything bad that happens in the Capitol, including the Capitol fire. A longtime security guard in 1948 claimed that any person who can find the carving without being told where to look is evil. That's a wrap for Creepy Capitol Carvings, part 2 of our Haunted Tours edition. Next up, Legends of the Halls.
Yeah. So think there may be a possibility of some demonic influence in the source of all of this?
When was that building built?
That is such a great question that I can't believe I didn't think to look that up. So I'll get back to you on that.
How about the other one? Why am I thinking about those?
Because we're flashing back to the library, the opening scene.
But you know, seriously, that's odd when you talk about the founding, right? And what the founding fathers did at the church and the prayers.
Right.
And then
Kind of a
now you
contrast.
have this, a state capitol. I mean, because I mean, who doesn't love Gothic architecture, right? I mean, we even as kids, we're like, oh, it's a cool gargoyles. There was a little cartoon gargoyles, I mean, so you think about fairies and the mystic world just as stories, right? You just think of it as Lord of the Rings, or elves and goblins and the Hobbit, right?
Yeah.
When you kind of thinking about the context of this, contrasting, like I said, with how our country was began. Now here we have a state capitol that has all these weird little pagan things on it that they don't have cherubs and angels and
You noticed that?
right?
Yeah, they got this little guy.
Yeah. Which, like I said, normally, and I grew up, watching fantasy movies, and because that's what all that reminds me of, right? Like I said, the Gothic architecture, the Renaissance, all these things. But
I was like, yes.
The thing has all been, it's something for the state, for the government, it's supposed to be a functional building. Spend enormous money
Yeah,
for every little chip on that stone.
right.
I don't know why they can have a functional, that's my opinion.
no,
Functional building.
the
Yes.
construction of it
It
there
was-
time. put into
Yes.
it,
There was intention.
intention.
Oh, yeah. It's a little shocking really to see something that I would presume that taxpayer money was used to build it.
Yeah, well, 100%. And so, but think about this. Sacrifice of children, Baal worship. Think there's a demonic influence there? How long do demons live?
So I was just looking up Baal worship. And that's just, that was Jezebel,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
I mean,
Her father was the king of Phoenicia, capital of Baal worship there.
nasty, nasty stuff. And the little thing I was looking at said Baal was a fertility god.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's.
As in reproductive rights?
Yeah, as in,
Right
right.
on the table and stuff like that?
And then Moloch as well, too.
Yeah.
I mean, and I just actually sent you something that you might want to take a look at too. So yeah, I mean, this is kind of grim stuff. So the 70s, man.
Well,
Right?
Well, sex, drugs, and rock.
Yeah.
Well, to lighten the mood a little bit, one thing about the crash of the 1970s, this is short, but we'll end on this note.
All the shortages we have is a gasoline shortage. You know what else is disappearing from the supermarket shelves? Toilet paper. Ha, you can laugh now. There is an acute shortage of toilet paper in the good old United States. We gotta quit writing on it. But I want to tell you, it is serious. I just saw a commercial where, I know it's coming, where Mrs. Olson comes in with a shopping bag and the housewife says, forget the coffee, just give me the shopping bag. I want to tell you.
And you know that was 1973 because of his suit.
Yeah, I love Johnny Carson.
And that's what you were talking about, what's happened in the last 2 years. Right?
No, there's something else related to Washington State, but yeah, so that's enough of that. So slightly lighter note to end on there, but yeah, nothing new under the sun, right? So any other reactions, thoughts, comments, questions on the kickoff of the 1970s?
What were we talking about?
Oh, I said, when I mentioned Washington State,
Yeah.
was one of the first states to follow New York's example. Washington State, and following New York's example, is going to come up. Something happened with Washington State, similar to New York in the last 2 years.
Oh, in the last two, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that's the sport, to be,
Yeah,
to.
that's foreshadowing.
Okay.
Does it have anything to do with BLM and all that?
No, it has to do with COVID.
Oh, okay, so we have to wait.
Yeah, we're not there yet.
Okay. Well, this really makes me look at the 70s, because Diana and I were talking today about, I was telling them how we had through a 70s party.
That's right.
This with the disco ball and everything, and Diana was like, oh, yeah, you know, I threw it too, but now I don't think there's anything I want to celebrate about the 70s.
Hey, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater now.
I don't know. I don't know.
We can take the good, take the good.
But it seems like to me, I mean, and I'm not taking anything away from the Holocaust, absolutely not.
No.
But it seems like there was this escalation.
Exactly.
Right. I mean, Leslie, not taking away, I mean, you can't obviously, how can you get even worse than that? But yeah, this escalation or, at the very least, just a continuing of, and you know, people don't think about it, abortion in those terms. They don't. They
Well,
don't, oh, it's just, it's.
They didn't
not-
think about killing Jews in those
Yeah,
terms.
it's nothing. It's just, you know, little blob of cells or.
The Jews weren't
or whatever.
fully human. They weren't,
Yeah,
yeah.
right, yeah, just, whew.
they had messed up genes and yeah,
Well, yeah, because we have to abort the
it's eugenics.
the babies that, you know, might have, you
Mhm.
know,
That aren't perfect.
right, that are perfect, yeah.
Mhm.
Well, it's harder to say, huh?
Charles Darwin,
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah, right.
but she was opposed to abortion, let's not forget. You wouldn't know it now, but she was.
But
She was all for eugenics and
isn't that what abortion
and-
is? Eugenics?
it's one form of it. It could, because of how you target, but that wasn't, her whole thing with Planned Parenthood wasn't abortion.
Okay,
She was not pro-abortion. Very important to keep our facts straight. Hers was the elimination of races, genocide through other means.
yeah,
including birth control, including things like, we had the minimum wage to keep people out of work so they couldn't afford to reproduce, things like that.
Yeah.
That's where minimum wage came from, yeah.
Yeah, it just is. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and again, godless, not seeing the godly value in every individual human life. And so we see America rising through the 1917, 1945, 1973, we start, yeah. And so patterns, these things all fit the pattern and time out. So, yeah. Anything else from anyone else for this evening? If not, it sounds like it'd be a good time to go before the Lord in prayer together. Pray for this nation, pray for each other. So with that, let's stop our share.
Including people.
One of the words that, are we rolling downhill?